Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Agile and business agility are concepts which are together. So the business agility, in fact, is to inspire concepts and agile concepts. So we have turned them applicable things within the company to go further, to go beyond, and to bring a chain of value and to bring us to the world. So AlonRozen, it was one of the pioneers of it, and gonna give to us some tips to bring the best of the business agility so as to reach the optimal performances. So he will speak in English. So if for those who are following the interpreting, please go into French.
Thank you. And allow me to move to the presentation, which will be in English. So, hello everyone. Hello Paris. Hello wherever you are. Today's talk will be the Agile Flywheel, a concept that Martin and I have developed. And it's especially how businesses can leverage agility for optimal performance. My name is AlonRozen. I am Dean of École de Pont Business School and Professor of Innovation, especially focused on business model innovation. And I'm very proud to share the stage with my good colleague.
And yes, thank you, Alon. My name is MartinCalnan. I work with Alon at the business school and in charge of executive education. And to dive right in, we wanted to give a shout out to Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, you might ask, why Charles Darwin? Well, in many ways, we believe that he is the father of agility, or at least one of the founding fathers of business agility. And we would like to demonstrate over the next few minutes how this evolutionary theory that he came up with and the core of this evolutionary theory, which is that it's not necessarily the strongest, the biggest, the fastest that survive, but it is those who respond to change best that survive. And that is the very definition of business agility. So we hope that over the next few slides, we're going to be able to convince you just how important it is, not just to survive, but to actually do it, to thrive while doing it. This is what we call the Agile effect. By the way, this is not a typo, this is not a misspelling. We do mean effect and not effect. Why? Because businesses have by and large recently fallen in love with business agility. It's business agility that, it's Agile this, it's everything. And the narrative is quite simple. Well, we've been hearing about the VUCA world for a good decade now. Well, for the past 18 months, we're actually living it. It's not just a concept, not just an idea, not just something we throw out, it's reality. And we've been finding that business agility and agility as a whole has really helped companies, those companies that are being able to manage this, to somehow navigate this uncertainty, this ambiguity, this volatility a little bit better. It has also been clearly the source of increased productivity for many companies and many organizations that have found themselves confronted with the fact that traditional methods have probably reached or are at least reaching their limits in terms of productivity. And finally, in terms of resilience and adaptability, I mean, with the economic crisis that we're facing, with the pandemic that we're facing, clearly what used to be visionary goals, strategic goals, have become a necessity. And more top companies are doing it. So this love affair between Agile and business is a reality today.
And so what we'd like you to do, or to do for you today, is to introduce another concept called the flywheel effect, this time with the E. And basically, for those who aren't familiar with this, it was a concept that was kind of coined by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, and later he did a complete monograph dedicated to the flywheel. And basically his take was this, success, optimal performance is not predicated on a single defining action, a killer app, a a strategic program, something lucky that happened, kind of an aha miracle moment. No, it's basically the grinding effect of getting a flywheel to start to move, creating the momentum. And over time, if you have strategic alignment in your operations, you should be able to increase the momentum and the speed that the flywheel turns. And that's what he attributes superior performance to, was the flywheel effect. Now, to illustrate this, kind of one of the best examples of modern times we could show is maybe Amazon, and that's what we'll do on the next slide, is the flywheel effect in action. So, you know, if you're Amazon and you're starting to offer lower prices on a range of categories, starting with books and then going into electronics and fashion and everything else that they do today, but initially even just with books, you're offering lower prices than the competition. And what that's doing is attracting customers, and that creates traffic. That extra traffic creates attention from third-party sellers who are invited then to sell on the Amazon platform. Thanks to the third-party sellers, Amazon's able to expand the store even more, add new product categories, even be more competitive on prices, which means that what's happening is they're growing the top line, which is the revenues, on a fixed cost basis. And so as the revenues grow and the fixed cost base stays similar, what does that mean? They can then offer even lower prices to their customers. And so you can see how once this dynamic begins, once the flywheel has gone around once you can increase the momentum and the speed of how fast that goes around, it could explain a large part of the optimal performance of Amazon for the last few years. And so that's kind of the story of strategic alignment, getting the flywheel to move. And now we'll see there's a few twists in the story when you put the two together.
So can we talk about an agile flywheel? Is there such a thing as an agile flywheel? Well, we believe there is. And we'd like to illustrate this point through the case Alon and I were lucky enough to do. We were lucky enough to study from very close and write an article on the agile transformation of ING in the Netherlands. And just to illustrate, how did ING get this flywheel, this agile flywheel, to start turning? Well, it starts with operational agility. This means it starts very basic, very local, very small. It's one team with one project, revamping their online banking application. It's completely outside of the existing structure, and it's deeply embedded in the IT. Gradually, over about 18 months, well, this one team becomes several hundred teams, and all of IT, little by little, goes agile. But it's still very operational. It's still very much in one sector. But inevitably, as you all know, once agile starts creeping into an organization, well, it starts causing a little bit of clashes, a little bit of tension with the other departments. And so little by little, business gets affected because they need to be providing product owners, which they don't have. They don't even know what it is. And so over the next 3 years, it also takes time. Over the next 3 years, gradually it goes from one part of the organization to the another. And that's where you start moving this flywheel as the organizational agility starts to creep in. So it's first IT, then another part, in this case, business. Then from business, inevitably, it starts going to customer care. Once customer care starts playing in that, well, suddenly you have to rethink all your KPIs, and suddenly you need to start thinking about how do I actually manage people in terms of HR around all of this. And all of these things put together gradually lead to what happens 3 or so years later. Well, they actually launch what they call one way of working, which is the official launch of the agile transformation company-wide in the Netherlands at ING. What we believe, though, is that, and you probably picked up on it, one way of working, agility. Bit of a paradox, right? Bit of a contradiction in terms. So this is what we like to call when, oh wow, one way of working goes to uh-oh. And that's when things really start falling apart. Why? Because one way of working confuses or conflates agility with methods, whether they be agile, whether they be DevOps, whether they be lean, you name it. And so suddenly what you're actually doing is that you're taking agility out of agile. Because what an organization does is that it starts codifying agile. It starts saying one size fits all, and you literally lose the purpose of agile. Or do you, Alon?
So the agile flywheel, when you actually look at it and you realize what's happening, and how do you avoid the part of oh wow, is when you onboard the leadership team. It turns out the agile flywheel, and this is again something we saw with ING, if it is just operational and organizational agility, it's not enough. At some point, it's going to hit a glass ceiling, which is basically the top management team and even the board. And so the 3 points of the lever of a true kind of agile flywheel, which pushes towards optimal performance, is when you have alignment between the operational agility, the organizational agility, and leadership agility. This ties in quite well with the presentation you saw previously by Bernard Coulati when he talked about kind of the individual, the team, and the leader agility and how it's necessary to hit all three in order to get optimal performance, which is what the agile flywheel kind of pushes towards. The dividend of a smooth running flywheel is the superior performance or the optimal performance we've been talking about. And the lack of onboarding of the leadership is one of the grains of sand you can throw into this gear and kind of screw up your business agility transformation. Now, the agile flywheel, if we look at it kind of in that lens, is then no longer just kind of a wheel, but more kind of the Mobius loop of infinity loop, any way you want to call it, in which there are different phases that hopefully create a virtuous circle or virtuous spiral going from one to the end, one end to the other. And basically, what we mention here is that operations and organization are one side of the equation in the agile flywheel, but it can't turn alone without the leadership and governance side as well. And for example, when Martin referred to the oh wow going to oh, it's when the leadership and governance becomes an organizational barrier to increased agility. And so it's very important that the leadership and governance side of the equation keeps the momentum moving, and that there's a good alignment between operations, organization, leadership, and governance in order to really kind of get the full benefits of agility, business agility in general, and kind of the resilience and adaptability that everyone says was the main drivers for business agility. But is that the whole story? Maybe not. Martin?
Exactly. Problem solved, you might say. We have business agility. We have the flywheel. Well, not really, because today we're all facing an unprecedented global crisis. This unprecedented global crisis has put business agility, like we saw a minute ago, and agility in general, center stage. But it's only dealing with, we believe it's only dealing with the symptoms and not the cause of the problem. Let me illustrate. In a recent study done by Adaptation Institute, when asked, what are the causes of today's crisis? What is the main cause of today's crisis? The virus, our friend COVID, only comes in 5th position. The 4 first positions all relate to trust. Whether it is trust in authority, trust in institutions, trust in leadership, or trust in the ability of institutions and leadership to deal with the crisis. So what we have here is the realization that what we need to address is not so much the agility flywheel, but the trust flywheel. This is the Kickstarter. How does it work? Well, It's all predicated upon trust, obviously. But how do you build trust? Well, trust starts through interaction. Deconstruct the word interaction, acting amongst ourselves, acting together, collaborating. And this is particularly interesting because, as Alex Pentland in his book Social Physics illustrates very clearly, interaction and teams that interact a lot and well is the biggest predictor of engagement within these same teams. So what you have interaction that drives engagement. As Bernard suggested in his talk previously, and as you all know, engagement is directly related both to higher productivity, but also higher retention of talent. In other words, to performance. So engagement drives performance, which itself reinforces trust, which is going to drive interaction to engagement and trust. And this is the typical, once again, flywheel effect or Kickstarter flywheel effect that we believe is the key to actually achieving business agility.
So now that you have the full story, it's not just resilience and adaptability and Charles Darwin behind the Agile flywheel dynamics, but we have an underlying kind of motivator, which is trust. And so if we try to kind of schematize this and give you in one graphic the essence of our thinking, is that yes, business agility has to have two sides to the equation: operations and organization working well and achieving agility, but also with the blessings and participation of the leadership and the governance. But all of that grinds to a halt or doesn't even get started in many cases without the flywheel, the smaller gear, the Kickstarter, as Martin called it, which is the trust flywheel. And so it's kind of like a prerequisite for any kind of agility transformation, business transformation with agility in mind, is to have trust as the foundation. Without trust, not much is going to happen, or the experiments, which are an initial part or an essential part of business agility, won't go very far. And so again, if you can get the trust wheel moving, the small gear, that allows the bigger gears of the business agility to achieve optimal performance, even when climbing mountains. To use a Tour de France kind of metaphor, the gears are all running well, and it allows you to go uphill without slowing down, and which is kind of COVID was a big uphill. And we saw that most of the companies that are doing business agile with the foundation of trust were able to keep going without slowing down. They even accelerated in some cases. And so basically that's the crux of our take on basically business agility and how do you achieve optimal performance. But we'll leave the final words to our good friend Yoda. If optimal performance you seek, business agility you must achieve. The right balance between process, trust, and mindset, Agile is. And so kind of to recap the big picture on this, is that yes, there's a lot of process involved in business agility, but if you go too far, well, you create ossification and you create the one way of working rather than a new way of working, which is experimental and must stay agile. So maybe from oh wow, we should be going to a wow, which is an agile way of working, which is predicated on trust. If the teams have trust, and we talk about 3 levels of trust with Martin. We talk about vertical trust, so leadership kind of towards the rest of the organization. We have horizontal trust, trust between the teams. As we know, business agility is creating diverse teams, and the trust has to be there as well for the teams to establish optimal performance. And then there's the mindset, and it's not just an agile mindset, but it's a growth mindset of thinking that there's a lot of new ideas out there, new ways that we can work together, even new ways that we can do agile. And I say the beautiful part of agile is there is no cookbook, there is no recipe book. Every company that's doing agile is doing agile in their own flavor. But if you have those right ingredients, trust as the underlier, organizational and operational agility, and then leadership agility comes in and doesn't create the barriers, rather removes the barriers, you can really achieve optimal performance with business agility. So that's our take on the picture of how you get from business agility to optimal performance with the Agile Flywheel. We hope you enjoyed it, and basically it's now a kind of a shooting match. You can give us your best shots, and we can open the floor to Q&A, which I think will be managed by Wilson once again.
And by the way, questions can be in French as well.
Yes.
Don't feel shy. On parle français.
Or Italian for Martin.
Très bien, merci, merci Alon et merci
Thank
Martin.
you very much, Alon and Martin, for your excellent presentation. We already have the two questions directly. We have in French and in English. We will try to do our best. With regard to the first question, we have a question from Ian, who asks us, well, he thinks that the most important role so far is to have all teams working together with trusting and working coherently together. So if unless there was a very important role, what would it be?
J'ai envie du coup, je vais répondre en français puisque la
Well,
question...
I will answer in French since the question is made in French.
J'ai envie justement de un petit peu du process et de la méthode agile.
I would like to live a little the agile method and process and to have a certain distance. And then I would tend to say that the most essential role that we see in any team, all teams, and I'm speaking in the broad term, not just the organizational team or the team that is within the framework of an organization, but any kind of project or team, there's always the role, the relationship with the person who is in charge, who is the owner, the leadership, not in the sense of the mindset, and not necessarily in the hierarchical sense of the term. The person who is the leader, and we see that throughout all studies, the leader is the one who plays the central role of that will allow interactions and exploration, discovery, and this feeling of trust to take place, and allows this trust to disseminate throughout the team. So the central role for me is this role of this person who is in charge. Well, thank you very much for your answer. We have a comment from Victoria. Trust is also key with ourselves. Too many doubts will restrain us in our innovation. So trust is a mindset with oneself and others. So thank you very much for this information. Another question from Ian. Should we go faster than the flywheel?
I guess I'll go back to English just because English speakers don't have the subtitles in French. So the question was, can we go faster than the flywheel?
Yes, of course.
And it's kind of like, you know, in French, there's an expression that says you can't go faster than the music. And I would say the same is true here, that the flywheel is, you know, obviously it's a conceptual metaphor, but it actually kind of talks to the level of tactical and strategic alignment. And so it's very difficult to go faster. We saw it very well with the ING case. IT was doing some interesting stuff in Agile, but until IT and business came together to improve their banking app, it really didn't have an impact on the external exchanges between the company and its customers. But once it had that impact, then the rest of the organization started accelerating their move to Agile, and that's when the flywheel starts to turn. So I guess conceptually you can't go faster than the flywheel, but you can work together to increase the speed that the flywheel turns.
Okay, thank you so much for your return. So I have another question in English. Well, Just a few seconds. So how to control the speed of the flywheel? Is it good thing to try and control it?
If I might interject for a moment, we're about to look at a way to accelerate all of the flywheels because there's more than one in the presentation that's running very shortly. So while I completely understand this is a question to the original presenter, stay tuned.
Well done, Peter. That's a great
great teaser
and teaser.
Yeah.
Great teaser. But you better not disappoint.
Yeah. You've raised the bar of expectations.
Actually, I think this speaks also to what Alon just said in many ways. I think the strength of the image, at least that's what we feel with Alon, of the flywheel, is the notion that a flywheel is not just a wheel. It's not just something that you turn. It's something that as momentum increases, not only does it turn faster and faster, but it becomes more and more difficult to stop. In French, there's this notion of entraînement. It actually carries itself forward, so to speak. And so trying to control, to me, it's somewhat contradictory to want to control the speed of the flywheel. I think if a flywheel in a proper mechanism, in a proper team, in a proper organization that has built the different flywheels, starting with the trust flywheel, the faster the better, really. And as it speeds up, the whole organization actually speeds up and adapts and creates new flywheels.
Okay, so thank you. I have another question about ISAM in English. One size fits all. Is it only the matter with ing, with, or wow, one way of one working, or the majority of agile transformation, safe transformation, agile framework at scale?
Yeah. Yeah, very good question, Isam. This is something we're seeing across the board in companies that are trying to apply Agile. It's very difficult to resist the temptation of putting in processes that go across the board and across the organization. ING is an interesting example because it's not just based in Holland. It's not just in one country. It's across several European countries. It has different business units, etc. And so it's interesting to see them struggle with this. But it's true for companies like Spotify, Google, Facebook. For example, Facebook, which is an extremely powerful example of Agile at scale. One of the things they came up with recently was a problem that everybody was running too many experiments because the teams had so much autonomy that people were running the same experiments in different units without the two teams knowing about it. So how do you rein in experimentation and still say Agile? So all of these companies are struggling with their version of Agile and how to go towards a similar way of working without it becoming OWOW, ossified way of working. And so it's something we're seeing at all the companies basically we've looked at. And banking sector, high tech and fintechs are probably the best examples of that today. And Amazon and Apple, some of the biggest companies we're seeing today are working in this way. And you can see them bumping up against the limits of Agile at scale. And it's interesting to see each company running different experiments at the leadership and governance level in order not to stop the flywheel from turning. And so, that's kind of our take on that. As it's not just an ING phenomenon, it's something that we're seeing across the board. And it's getting interesting because there's a lot of companies now playing with Agile at very different levels and at very different scales.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. The time is over now. So thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. And then we need to say bye-bye and see you to the next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye-bye. Enjoy, Peter.
Yeah.